Well, hello to all of you out there. And I've been getting a lot of questions lately about what happened at the Dimensions of Disclosure conference. And a lot happened. Let me put it this way: you really need to use discernment in today's world when you're talking with anybody. Healthy skepticism is really called for in today's world. Um, Seen a lot of things there that was a little strange, a lot of ego. But I did get some interesting interviews. One was with Robert David Steele. It was a short one, and later we did a hour-long interview for BBS Radio. And you can get those interviews, bbsradio.com/spiritual activist. All of my radio shows are archived there. And if you want to watch the video version, just go to youtube.com/Lotus Guide and go to the folder for BBS Radio. There's a video file there of all of my interviews. So Robert David Steele, I'll let you judge. He's a CIA officer, and he has a lot of good things to say about what's going on in the world. Interesting things. He's definitely pro-Trump, and you have to admit there's some things that Trump is doing that's good, and we talked about this. You can't say anything bad about Trump because the Trumpers will get all over your case. You can't say anything good about Trump because the anti-Trumpers will get. We are so polarized. We have lost the ability to communicate, and communication, that's where the magic happens. If we can't communicate, we're not going to rise to that next level of coming together. There was a philosopher named Hegel talks about this. It's really, really, really important to be able to talk with people you disagree with and sort of come to some kind of a basic understanding. Even if the understanding is that the other person is completely full of shit, but it's important to talk and communicate. I have a short interview here with James Gilliand and Robert Steele. They were wanting to talk about a few things. Child trafficking came up a lot at this convention, by the way. And Robert David Steele is doing something really interesting with a person named Sasha, whom I'm also going to work out getting a interview with. Talked to Dr. Michael Sala. Michael Sala is a really good researcher into the Antarctic and the secret space program. Him and I are going to do an interview. I wanted to interview Laura Eisenhower, but I sort of changed my mind, and I told her I'd get a hold of her later, and for reasons best not talked about right now. We just better to talk to her later. Who else was there? Like a lot of people was there, and there's a lot to be said about the world we live in. And all I can say is when it starts coming out that we've been drastically misled by preachers and teachers and professors and parents and historians and everybody, our whole history is going to have to be rewritten before we can stand where we're supposed to be standing and go towards the future that we need to go to. And that's going to have a lot to do with alternative energy, which they don't want us to know about. Of course they don't. I mean, fossil fuels, not only the money, they're not worried about money. These people just print up whatever they need anyway. It's fiat money. I mean, if you and I had a printing press in the basement, imagine what we could do with ourselves, our lives, and the people we wanted to help. We'd have a lot of power. But that's what they really want. The money leads to power. So follow the power. If you follow the money, it's a short little trip. It just takes you to the Federal Reserve, and there you are at the printing press. But from that point on, follow where that takes you, because that's the power trippers, and they're the controllers, and they're really, really wanting to control where we live, what we see, what we eat, what we breathe, what we drink, everything. And here in Paradise, California, we know all too well that maybe they don't want a lot of people living out in these urban areas. So this is something to pay attention to. So right now, let's enjoy this little short conversation with James Gilliand, and Robert David Steele. And then right after that, I did a short interview with just Robert Steele about child trafficking. I know this is like, and I have people, oh, I don't like to think, get over it. These are our children. These are the world's children that are being trafficked as sex slaves all over the planet. And when they get used up, that's where the ugliness takes another dimensional jump into some kind of a reality that we don't even want to think about. So all I can say is I get a little bit irritated with especially some of the millennials. They just sit around on their couch with their little iPads and thinking of just comments to make. I mean, everything from what they had to dinner to what you did on a video to what you said and how you offended somebody. Get up off the couch, turn off your computer and your iPad, go to the front door and step outside, take a breath of deep, deep, fresh air while we have some, and start taking action. And this goes for everybody, myself included. I mean, apathy is really easy to get into because you feel disempowered. So let's listen to these guys.
We're keeping it close. All right, so we'll keep it close, and handing it back and forth is the handing of the Indian talking stick. Yeah. Okay, you're in charge. I'm at your service.
All right.
And if you decide to let me ask you a couple of questions,
so
that's
Robert
great.
David Steele, right?
Robert David Steele.
Okay. You ready?
Not Bob.
Okay. All right, we're here at the eCity booth at the Dimensions and Disclosure, and I've got Robert David Steele here, and we've had this really interesting conversation. And what's really interesting is after listening to him on the radio and with Cynthia McKinney, I had this epiphany that, God, if she ran for vice president, that would bring everybody together and we could go in the right direction, everything else. And he comes up and tells me the very same thing. So I'd like to get your take on that.
Well, I support Donald Trump, but I'm worried about it.
Yeah.
I think he has not done enough to reach out to black people, Hispanics. I'm a Latino, and white women in the suburbs. I know Cynthia McKinney. We drove an RV 3,000 miles across the country for #unrig. And I believe that at this point in time, the president should consider changing vice presidents. And Cynthia McKinney would absolutely be the crossover vice president, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think at the minimum, they should have a very, very high post that she would take over. And that would bring the whole country together, and it would be amazing. And we got to end all this division game going. And they're playing the race card, the gender card, and all these cards that are creating division and separation. And that would, doing that would just put it all together. And also too, I wanted to talk about your open source, what you've been working on lately. When I was listening about how you could get a tractor for having a farm and a ranch.
10%.
I know how expensive John Deere's are and all the other things you're talking about. Can you talk a little bit about your open source program?
And staying on your John Deere comment, one of the problems with John Deere, apart from its being very expensive, is that it has secret software that you're not allowed to repair.
Uh-huh.
And so when it breaks, you have to haul it out and get it repaired secretly, and then they sell it back to you. Okay? My open source adventure started in the 1980s, and it was Richard Stallman who was doing open source software at the same time that I was doing open source intelligence. As a spy, I was asked to create the Marine Corps intelligence activity, and I realized we didn't know anything about Haiti or Burundi or Somalia or economics or all these other things. But then I went on, I wrote the Open Source Everything Manifesto, and I started meeting people like Dr. Marcin Jakubowski, who would be glad to help you create 55 farming machines at 10% to 20% the cost of the Western model, just using open source. So from where I sit, Putin, Xi Jinping, and Donald Trump all want the same thing. They want to lift up the 99%. The way they do that is with open source engineering at 10 to 20% of the cost of the failed Western model, which is 50% waste and 90% profit for the banks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so many avenues. There's so many things happening. I want to get your take on it. it's obviously everything's coming down.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and the like no rock is being left unturned. All the iniquities are going to be shouted from the rooftops, like they prophesized in the past. And I'm curious, what do you feel? Where are things at right now? Are the dark hearts or whatever? Are the white hats winning? Are the dark hearts collapsing? Just love to get your take on that.
The fact that I'm at this conference is like another out of body experience.
Uh-huh.
From where I sit, this conference represents the maturing of the awakening public.
Yeah.
And these ideas that have been called conspiracy theorists and truthers, and they've been mocked deliberately. They're now becoming mainstream. And I've got famous authors and top people in government and corporations telling me, Robert, thank you for agreeing with these people. We can't do it because we would lose our jobs or we would lose our speaking gigs. But there is a mass of people out there that appear very conventional who understand the truths that you have been talking about.
Yeah, I agree. It's. I don't think we shouldn't even use the word conspiracy anymore because it's actually factual evidence, behind all this stuff, and it's all going to come out. And what I see is that you got to get on the right side of the fence.
Yes.
And you can actually explain how this is going down because energetically, the whole electromagnetic light spectrum is off the scale right now.
Yes.
And so the Schumann resonance was at 14 yesterday, I think it was. It used to be 7.8, it's at 14. It went up to almost 1,000 at one time. So we can't deny that there's a huge energy influx, there's a huge shift going on. How that's going to manifest or play out, I don't think anybody knows, but obviously it just seems that everything that's not frequency specific to these incoming energies and this shift are not going to fare well, and that's probably what you're seeing as well in that.
The big thing for me is I'm seeing a convergence of good. And I've done a lot of reading. I've only reviewed about half of what I've read, but I've got over 2,500 books across 98 categories with summary reviews, all free at 58iota.net, which we've talked about. And what I'm seeing is a convergence of good, and I'm also seeing that the evil guys started losing in 2012. There was a flip, just like the Mayan calendar anticipated. And I have this sense that all of these people that have been praying and meditating and having good intentions have in fact drawn extra stellar as well as localized goodwill. And I have a feeling that Donald Trump represents, and Q represents, the awakening of the public and the fulfillment of all that we can be.
Yeah, I agree. I'll share an experience for you. It was really funny. I was meditating and I was connecting with the higher dimensional beings, and I go, when is this going to end? When is this craziness going to end? This is getting so bad. What's happening with the children and just all this nonsense. And they kept showing me the letter Q. And I go, Q, what's Q? What are you talking about? And I go, is this like Kuan Yin going to open up a can of whoop-ass or something? Or is it this omnipresent being like in Star Trek going to show up? And they kept showing me this letter Q, and I go, this makes no sense at all. And this is way back and before September. It's a couple years ago. And then all of a sudden it starts coming out. And I go, that's who it is. I go, it's the white hats that are hooked up to the higher dimensional beings. They're being guided. Some know they're guided, some don't. And there's a huge shift in consciousness and energy. It's multidimensional, and it's coming in now. And we're going to see everything hitting the fan, very soon.
Well, let me say that I am a huge fan of Q, and I think I know at least one of the 4 people that is posting is Q. And I believe that at the end of the day, the people that were attacked by the Obama administration as part of this Russian witch hunt are all going to be vindicated. And it is going to be demonstrated that Donald Trump, not Barack Obama, is the gold standard for integrity going forward.
Yeah, it sure is looking that way. I mean, all the evidence is pointing that way. There are people that no matter what you say, they're stuck in that victim mentality, or they've been so programmed or socially conditioned by, the RNN News Network. I call it the Reptilian News Network. but yeah, go ahead. But they are coming around. They are.
And let me say that there are several billionaires right now that are thinking about how to support the president.
Nice.
And one of the things they're thinking about is buying certain media properties. For example, the Christian News Network
Uh-huh.
or the New Trump Times.
Yeah, yeah. That would, yeah, that would be Trump Tower times. That would be a good one. But it does. Everything is going in that direction, and this conference is part of that. There's so much information coming out. Uh, awesome connecting with you. I know we have a lot of
Absolutely.
shared goals and intentions here, and I think the whole universe is going to come together. When we figure out who's who, we're going to be blown away in the end. So,
I really admire what you're doing, and I'm learning from you.
oh, thank you. I think we all learn from each other. All right.
All right, we're going to be talking to David Steele, Robert David Steele,
Yep.
today. And did I see you on? It was like a tribunal kind of a thing. That was amazing, man. I've been showing everybody that because nobody's paying attention to trafficking right now. You know.
Well, actually, President Trump is paying attention to trafficking. He did the executive order on trafficking, and I think that was the stake in the heart of the deep state.
Yeah.
That's what allowed all of the sealed indictments, most of which will never be opened. They're more to neutralize people. But the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, which was created by a treaty with Sasha Stone as the lead organizer, has a judicial commission of inquiry into human trafficking and child sex abuse. And Sir John Walsh of Brana is the Chief Justice. And we have a couple of lawyers and a couple of other senior people who have been members of Parliament and so forth as the justices. And I was honored with the position, as well as being a commissioner, of Chief Counsel. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm more of an intelligence professional, academic. But what we've been doing is trying to educate the public. We're not an arresting authority. We're not a state authority. We're simply a people's council. And what we've done is some very, very powerful interviews. And I would make the point that it's not just the Catholic Church. It's the Mormon Church, it's the Boy Scouts, it's the United Nations. Every single organization that has anything to do with children attracts pedophiles who end up being at the top of the organization, and then they flip the organization. And an organization that started as a child-friendly organization ends up being a child predation organization.
Right. Boy Scouts is a good example.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah, there is a weakness, especially in the masculine arena. There's a weakness, and I think it's mostly going to take women stepping forth and saying, hey, we have to do something about this.
That's a very good point, because one of our commissioners is a former NYPD detective, Jimmy Boots Rothstein. He's actually a German Catholic, and he has a concept for Mothers United, and he really believes that the mothers around the world, but the mothers in the United States in particular, need to start holding the government, including our 18,000 police jurisdictions, for ignoring human trafficking. We have upwards of 800,000 kids in the United States every single year disappearing. And worldwide, the number is moving towards 8 million a year. A lot of these kids are trafficked. A lot of these kids are put into snuff videos. A lot of these kids are tortured and used in satanic rituals. Their blood is drunk after it's been adrenalized to create adrenochrome. And we have satanic rituals where children are being killed and their body parts are being eaten. Or young children are giving birth and the fetuses are being eaten on the spot. I mean, I have no direct knowledge of this stuff, but I've heard from so many witnesses and read a number of books. Bottom line for me is that government around the world, and the government in the United States of America in particular, is not representing the public interest. They're actually owned by the deep state, and the deep state and the satanic ritual abusers have free reign to do whatever they want, and they get away with it.
You know, the things you're talking about right now, Robert, is like so important, because if people knows about this, it gives a whole new idea of figuring out what happens on the news. Like I think it's in Virginia or West Virginia, one of the states where they're allowing the baby to be born and then later killed if it's so deemed is the right thing to do. There's more to this story than just organ donors. You know, that baby is worth $500,000 if it's alive, 50,000 if it's not alive. So now they're allowing the babies to be born, and up to 2 weeks, the mother with the doctor can agree to the baby. But I think these babies are disappearing because they need babies. And this is so, it's hard to talk about because it's so dark. But we have to start talking about it because the cognitive dissonance, every time somebody hears about this, that cognitive dissonance gets less and less and less.
Well, I agree with you. And one of the things we've found in taking testimony is that there are some many lowlifes who actually give birth to children as a cash crop. Right. What I had not known was that it was an international crime network. And the most recent story is there is a polygamous sect of the Mormon Church. It's been disavowed by the Mormon Church, but it's nevertheless claiming to be part of the Mormon Church. They are giving birth to babies that are apparently then not registered and sold live in Turkey. The premium pedophilia product now is apparently a Mormon baby from Utah, a white Mormon baby from Utah.
Wow. You know, and a lot of this is to get people involved. There is we have to admit, there's some kind of a dark sickness in mankind right now that has to be healed. It's too easy to tap into like a politician. They're narcissists. There's a lot of psychology there. It's going haywire. They're easy to walk into this realm little by little. First thing they do is they bring them in with a hooker, you know, escort. Next thing they do is they say, okay, yeah, I know she looks really young, but she's 18.
Let me just stop you right there. What we actually do in the spy business is get the person drunk with a legal age hooker,
right,
and then drug the drink and put in a 12-year-old while they're drugged, and the 12-year-old is mind-controlled or has been trained to basically have sex. And the video is gotten not necessarily with the knowledge and complicity of the person being videoed.
Right.
So there's a path here.
Yeah.
Now, then people seem to acquire a taste for it. Bill Clinton seems to have acquired a taste for it. Hillary Clinton acquired a taste for it. They both like girls. This is all very, very ugly. And
Right.
Jeffrey Epstein, I really want to stress this. Jeffrey Epstein was the front man for a fake billionaire, Les Wexner, one of the Zionist mega funders who may have also funded 9/11. Les Wexner was the guy who basically funded a Mossad operation. Ghislaine Maxwell is known to have been a madam who was running prostitutes for elites, including children. They brought in Epstein to beef up her operation and appeal to the boys like Bill Clinton. What many people don't realize, because the media has been covering this up completely, is that the CIA and the FBI were complicit in this Mossad operation and all other similar Mossad operations across the United States from day one. And the media is covering it up because so many of them are compromised. We have a joke in my circles. How many pedophiles does it take to cover up our pedophilia entrapment operation? The answer is all of them.
Yeah, every single one of them. Yeah. But, you know, here we go again. You know, this is a deep, dark hole that we're going down, and it's hard to navigate this in such a way that people will listen. Again, this is why it's so important for people like you to come out and start blowing the whistle. There's so much going on this planet right now, so much going on that needs to be talked about. And if we don't start talking about it, like Trump, for instance, okay, why is it that everybody's afraid to talk about Trump? Why do you think?
I don't know. We need to wrap up here. But my bottom line is, in the ITNJ, we're doing what we can to help educate the public and awaken public consciousness. But no one has done more than Donald Trump to take on this problem. His executive order on human trafficking was a stroke of patriotic genius. And anybody who doubts our president's commitment to this country just should look at that executive order. That is the heart and soul of why Donald Trump is a good man doing good for America.